Sorry. Thank you very much for having me here. I'm very pleased to have been invited. So I would like to thank Aspetar and especially Olivier Girard for thinking of me for that. So I'm really proud to be here. I'm really happy. That's the first time. The second reason I'm really happy to be here is that this is what my street in Canada looked like a few days ago. So with the snow, it was -10. So it's nice to be here with the warm weather. What I would like to do today is try to perhaps, now I've seen the different talks by the different people before me, I would like to try and perhaps combine all this in 20 minutes and with the very slim evidence that there is out there, and try to speak about the capacity to sprint and the effect of hypoxia or hypoxemia on that capacity. And what I would like to focus on today is really the slim evidence of the effect of hypoxia on team sports at altitude. You will see, and as you've seen in the presentation by Olivier, that there is not many papers out there. So I think it's important to come back to lab studies, and I will talk about a little bit about the repeat sprint ability or repeat sprint capacity that's been studied in labs, and the effect of hypoxia on that. And as David Bishop has highlighted, I think it's important to look at the mechanisms to understand what's perhaps happening on the field, although repeat sprint ability is very different than team sport performance. And on the third point, I would like to try and show you some data that we just collected on the regulation of performance, especially during self-paced exercise, if I can say that, during sprints in hypoxia, and talk about the link between central and peripheral fatigue a little bit. And at the end, I'll try to wrap up and perhaps try to update the determinants of repeat sprint exercise at altitude and see from there how perhaps altitude training can improve those determinants. So team sport in hypoxia, I could find only 2 papers really from PubMed. The first study was from Max Shari, published in 2007, I think. And this one that has also been presented by Olivier. So I have the easy task because everyone has talked about everything pretty much before me. So it's going to be faster. So this is the paper published by Dr. Nassis in 2013, so this year. And that was a nice overview of the different teams. I think there were 100 games played between sea level and 1,700 meters in South Africa during the World Cup. And this is on the graph over there, you see the distance covered by all the players in all those teams. I think there were around 64 matches in total. And you can see that there is a significant decrement at about 1,200 meters. And they also looked at a few other variables, especially the top running speed here, and you could see pretty much no difference across the different elevations. So I think this provides us with the first cues really officially published about the effects of perhaps altitude on some factors obtained during match or game performances. And I would like to show you something that's in review right now, in revision, and that has been collected or done actually in collaboration with the Institute of Sport in Australia. That's something led by Dr. Gavigan, and that's the work from Crystal Hammond as well. She was an honor student at VU, Victoria University, where I worked for a few years. These data are from the Australian young soccer team, so junior team, and these have been collected during the Youth Soccer Cup, or in preparation to that cup, I should say. So the matches were done at sea level in Australia and in Denver, so Colorado, 1,600 meters, and we had GPS on the players, and I wanted to perhaps update a little bit more what has been done so far. Oops. So not surprising, we saw a decrease in total overall distance run by the players. This is here the high velocity running in meters per minute, done at sea level, at altitude in Denver after 4 days of acclimatization, I should say. This is some acclimatization. And then again after 6 days of being at altitude. And you can see a reduction of about 15% in that high velocity running. And we didn't see any difference in maximal acceleration frequency, so the number of acceleration during the game, and that was in acceleration per minute, so no difference between sea level, etc. So it tends to fit a little bit with what has been shown before, in the sense that high velocity running is not, or acceleration, I should say, is not really affected. But we looked a little bit more, and we tried to use another method, which is the rolling 5-minute sample period. So we looked at we tried to pick up the highest 5-minute epoch of intensity, I would say, during the game. And in those 5 minutes, we could perhaps check a little bit better or explore a little bit better the effect of hypoxia on that intense part of the game. And this is what we have: distance, high velocity running, and acceleration again. And I would like to point out that by using this method, we're able to see a greater effect from 15 to 21% on high velocity running at day 4, and from nothing overall during the whole game, compared to a decrease of about 19-20% when we look at that 5-minute high intensity period. So I think we can conclude that, or we can say that perhaps hypoxia has an effect on not only the aerobic component of the game, but perhaps also the anaerobic components, or the prolonged anaerobic components. So I would like to talk a little bit about the repeat sprint exercise and what we know from lab studies, because there's not much out there to try and support the mechanisms first, and then try to find some direction to really target with altitude training modalities specific adaptations. So approximately 7 papers out there, 6 only with team sport athletes, and they have covered, that's important, simulated team sport play. So from a few percent in terms of hypoxia effects on repeat sprint exercise to up to perhaps 30 to 40% on shuttle tests. And that's one of the papers out there, published in MSSC by Weston, 2001, so more than 10 years ago now. And again, at altitude, from sea level here, 6 hours coming into altitude, and I was 1,700 meters. There is a drastic reduction in the time completed on the shuttle run test. There was a 30-meter sprint, I think, on this one, 30-second sprints. So again, not surprising, the effect of altitude on team sport play or simulated team sport play. What I would like to show you here is a bit of some study that we did at VU the last few years, and trying to focus on different mechanisms, not just looking at overall performance and intensity, but trying to pinpoint where it's happening. If we can try and combine all the methods in one study, but it's never easy. As Marcus has mentioned, it's always a challenge to try to have many different things happening at once. So in that study, we had soccer players repeating 10-second sprints with 30 seconds rest, and they did that at sea level and in hypoxia. And we looked at saturation, EMG activity, central peripheral fatigue, as well as near-infrared spectroscopy. For those who don't know that technique very well, that's pretty much sending an infrared laser into the tissue. It can be done on the muscle tissue. It can be done also on the brain or the cerebral cortex. And basically, you're able to assess the oxygenation of the blood under the probe of that device. So that gives you the oxygenation of the tissue. And so in hypoxia, 13% oxygen, this is what happens. You've got the saturation, arterial saturation on this axis here. And here you've got the mechanical work. And we had, as has been shown before, a nice decrease in hypoxia right from the beginning, right from the first sprints. And then saturation stayed low all the way through the end of the sprint. So we can perhaps talk about a reduction in availability of oxygen during the exercise. The performance was also reduced. This is total mechanical work produced for each sprint at sea level and hypoxia. And we had approximately in kilojoule overall total mechanical work combined for the 10 sprints, a decrease by 9%. 8-9%. We had other studies showing about similar things, 9 to 10% reduction. What's interesting is that we've looked at the muscle nears, and this is the the change in deoxyhemoglobin in micromole from the baseline. And this is what happens. The muscle gets deoxygenated super quickly right from the first sprints, and then it's increased, but not that much. It's pretty much similar all the way through, or it plateaus all the way through. So, and we had the same data pretty much in hypoxia. A little higher here. So greater deoxygenation, but nothing really significantly different between the condition. So yeah, I put here similar extraction. Some who know the NIRS, and I find one here in the room, may say that it's not exactly extraction. I agree. This is really, the NIRS is really the balance. Oh, sorry, don't have anything anymore. Hello? 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 Can you hear me? Yeah, the mic. Oh, it's back on. All right. So the NIRS is really the balance between the oxygen, the availability and the extraction. So it's never easy to talk about extraction only. But that's one of the suggestions that we had in the paper. So pretty much not a greater deoxygenation in hypoxia, and we suggested that it was not likely limiting factor during exercise in hypoxia in those repeated sprint exercise. Might be a different story during endurance exercise. And what's interesting here, although we concluded there was perhaps no real effect of hypoxia on muscle deoxygenation during the sprints, I think it's important to see that for a given extraction of oxygen, the performance was still lower here. So perhaps we can say that the aerobic efficiency of the contraction was affected or impaired at altitude during the short sprints. So the sprints are one thing that occurs during a game. The important thing is to also be able to recover very quickly between one sprint to another, or from acceleration to another acceleration. And that has been highlighted well by David Bishop. And that's something we looked at in those data. We reanalyzed a little bit the data. And instead of focusing on only the sprints, we looked at the muscle NIRS signal during the recovery period. So this is the same signal here, the muscle deoxygenation signal in micromole. The change from the baseline, which is arbitrary 0. During the sprints, the recovery, the second sprint, the second recovery, the third sprint, etc., until 10. All right? So that's easy to pick up here. I guess it was not was not necessary to explain. But so we have the same graph here. The top data are exactly the same as before. These are sprint values. And then here you see the recovery values. What's interesting to see is that the recovery value seems to be quite constant in normoxia at sea level, but it seems that after some repetition, the muscle doesn't get reoxygenated, sorry, it's difficult to say in English, reoxygenated as well in hypoxia. So you can see a kind of a trend upwards here, and that was significant. So I just wanted to express those data a little bit differently. It might be easier. So this is the end of the sprints, the end of the recovery here, and I simply made the subtraction between the two to have one value per recovery period to show you the amount of oxygen or the amount of oxygenation recovered during that period. And that's the value here. So this is really the change from the end of the sprint to the end of the recovery in normoxia and in hypoxia. And the reoxygenation capacity, this is something we call that way, was likely attenuated or significantly attenuated in hypoxia. We run every stats possible on that, mostly to please the reviewers, to be honest. But this is something that we highlighted in that paper. And we also look at the trends, and you can see the trends are quite different here. So we looked at the result on that, and the reoxy trend was also certainly lower in hypoxia. So this has been published this year with a colleague from Qatar here, from Aspire. And so this is what we think is interesting at happening at altitude. The reoxygenation ability of the muscle, or the reoxygenation capacity of the muscle, can be considered perhaps as an important limiting factor in hypoxia. If you are really interested in that, I suggest you attend the talk tomorrow, I think, by Alice Sweeting. She was a student, she's still a student at VU, and she has a complete story on that with different levels of altitude and other values. So that should be interesting. We looked also at the NIRS signal in the brain. And again, this is the deoxygenated blood here in micromole, the change again from baseline in normoxia during the 10 sprints. So it's increasing a little bit here, but there was a drastic increase right from the beginning in hypoxia. And this stays elevated like this, and a 45% difference. And we also look, I told you at the beginning, at the other parameters, central fatigue, EMG activity. And here on this is the EMG signal. The EMG signal was lower also in hypoxia compared to normoxia. And here I just showed you the correlation between the brain oxygenation and the sum EMG. So this is really the combined EMG signals of the different muscles in the legs. So we had mostly the gluteus maximus and the different quads muscle. So we had a decrease in both conditions, but the decrease was larger in hypoxia. And this decrease in EMG activity was correlated with a greater deoxygenation of the brain. So it seems that when the brain gets more deoxygenated, that there is a trend for a greater decline also in EMG activity. So we concluded in that paper that the brain deoxygenation was likely a limiting factor in hypoxia during repeated sprint exercise, so prolonged sprint activity, probably through or via a reduction in muscle activation. That's, unfortunately, I think, the only paper on sprint exercise, and there should be more research on this part, especially this, this link between the EMG signal and the central fatigue and the brain oxygenation. These are similar data, but from another study with 14% oxygen. We had the SpO2, but same thing, and cerebral TSI, tissue oxygenation or tissue saturation index in percent here. Same thing, sea level and hypoxic condition. And I just wanted to show you, sorry, I should explain, this is not 10 sprint anymore, this is 15, so 3 blocks of 5 with, I think, 4 minutes of recovery between the different sets here. And I just wanted to show you the decline in the TSI. So TSI is tissue saturation index. It's a little bit different than the HHB signal I showed you before, but it's interpreted, I would say, the same way. This is basically the oxygenation. So when this one goes down, that means that there is a deoxygenation or an impaired oxygenation. And I just wanted to show you that it's occurring very quickly, and also it stays low all the way through. But those values are really low. For example, around the 50% oxygenation here. From the top of my head, there are a couple of studies, one that I remember well, during Billaut-24March test in hypoxia. And I think the values at the end of the exercise, this is a paper by Andrew Sabadi in the US, in Colorado Springs. And I think the end of exercise in this incremental test, so up to Billaut-24March, is around 45%, with, I think, a greater level of hypoxia. And with those sprints, super intense, the guys are sprinting for 5 seconds all out. They are pretty much not breathing at all for the 5 seconds. They just focus on the bar and they just push very hard. And you can see that the values are getting super low here. So this is, again, 13–14% oxygen. This is considered a high altitude, so above 3,000 meters in simulated altitude. But I just wanted to show you how present it is and perhaps how significant it is when you sprint repeatedly at altitude. So, okay, this is what happens. I just wanted to summarize quickly. What could be seen as a limitation in all those studies. I've presented you a lot of mechanisms and a lot of studies that were done at around 3,000, above 3,000 meters. This is particularly the bunch of mechanistic or fundamental physiological studies that has been done. This could be seen as a limitation because most of the games usually are played below that level, so usually low to moderate altitude. But I think it's important to consider those studies because I think they give you valuable insights about the mechanisms that occur at altitude. So you may think that they might be not that relevant to performance on a game, on the fields at altitude, because it's mostly occurring here, but I think they give us important things. And I think they also respond to what was concluded at the end of this FIFA statement a couple of years ago, that it's important to understand the mechanisms of hypoxia during exercise performance, so we can better target them with different altitude training modalities. So in summary, we know that altitude affects team sport performance. It's been shown, a little bit only, but shown. Now it's coming up. And also it affects the ability to sprint repeatedly in a lab. Potential mechanisms include a variation of peripheral and central, I think, mechanisms. But what we didn't know, or what we don't know very clearly, is really the link or the interaction between the central and the peripheral fatigue. And I think that's what is important to understand. And perhaps in the future, we will be able, with specific training modalities, to target central or peripheral or both at the same time, depending on the altitude we travel at. And that's really something I wanted to present to you today. We've done a study in hypoxia again at Victoria University, where I was in Melbourne before. The questions were really, how do peripheral and central factors interact during sprints in hypoxia? It could be, and we based that hypothesis on previous papers that were published before, it could be that the magnitude of the activation of the muscle be adjusted, I would say, perhaps not selected, but adjusted to the level of peripheral fatigue. So that's really something we wanted to look at and explore a little bit more during this type of super intense exercise. And again, we'll be quick on that, but this is the data I've shown you before, the 3 blocks of 5 sprints. Mechanical work affected significantly by 9–10% in hypoxia. You can see the decrease here. And this is the EMG activity, so the sum RMS signal. Again, the sum of all the quads muscle. And you can see this is going down a little bit in normoxia, and this is much lower or significantly lower in hypoxia here. I just wanted to confirm or mention that the M wave was not affected, so we can perhaps think about these values are muscle recruitment. And in that study, we also had measures of magnetic stimulation, and I thank you, Professor Amand, for explaining this before. So it's going to be quick for me. This is the magnetic stuff. So we look at central fatigue, central motor commands, and to confirm the EMG activity data, we had a reduction in both conditions, so normoxic and hypoxic, pre-exercise, the black bar, so pre-exercise, yeah, and immediately post-exercise, we've been able to do that in 40 seconds after the end of the last sprint. We have a decline in both conditions, but the decline was significantly larger in hypoxic conditions. So it seems that there is more central fatigue in hypoxic condition. Interestingly, the peripheral fatigue, so this is a drop, a change, a negative change in the twitch. This is the quadriceps twitch from pre-condition to post-condition. We had these values in normoxia and hypoxia. What is interesting to show is that this is pretty much the same fatigue that we have in those sprint exercises. I would like to mention that the sprints are done all out. We ask the subject to do them all out every time. So we encourage them, we tell them, okay, another one, all out, another one, all out. So they are not supposed to pace themselves, but this is still a self-paced exercise in the sense that they know they have to do 10 sprints, or 15 in that case, and they can do whatever they want consciously or subconsciously. So this is another story. I don't want to enter in that debate, but we had these values in hypoxia. And I think they show that there is, whatever your interpretation is of this data, there is at least a very strong interaction between the peripheral compartments and the central mechanisms to perhaps affect or limit that degree of peripheral fatigue in altitude. So I think if we can sum up and summarize very quickly about and try to update the determinants of team sport performance or rapid sprint exercise, it's always difficult or difficult to mix the two. Yeah, we'll try to. We know that some of them persist from sea level to altitude, and I think about the pH regulation. This is important. Glycolytic activity or amounts, capacity for single sprints and perhaps repeat sprint exercise. But I think we can also add that the muscle reoxygenation capacity during an exercise at altitude is important, and that is perhaps linked with the PCR recovery of phosphocreatine that Professor Bishop has mentioned before. the overall efficiency of the aerobic pathways should become paramount at altitude during sports. I haven't mentioned that really because it's difficult to talk about everything. But yeah, VO2 could be a very important factor with some data coming up with HP mass effects, or at least correlation with sprint capacity and team sport play, and obviously the oxygen saturation overall at the systemic compartments. And I think also we can add the cerebral deoxygenation as an important factor, especially for higher altitude games. So really, hypoxia affects the three compartments: peripheral power, or peripheral muscles, brain, and overall the systemic ability of transport. And this is interesting because this is what happens in hypoxia. But at the same time, so there is a negative effect of hypoxia on performance. I think we agree with that now. But it's also interesting to say that since hypoxia has the power to affect all those things, this can actually be used as an additional training stimulus. And I think that's the message I wanted to say before going on in the next few talks and the next few presentations over the next few days. I think it's interesting to perhaps use hypoxia as a training tool for all these variables. And we can safely say that training modalities that can perhaps upregulate cerebral oxygenation or better maintain it or increase reoxygenation capacity should be correlated by an increase in sprint capacity, and perhaps ultimately with team sport play. I don't know if I have more time or not, or it's done. Yeah? OK, so I'll pass quickly on this. These were super fresh data I wanted to show you. See that the lines are showing changing. So basically, this is muscle and the brain TSI. This is that normoxic condition. Then acute hypoxic condition, the brain TSI, so the deoxygenation of the brain is lowered, and the green line is after intermittent hypoxic training with sprints, repeated sprints in hypoxia, and we were able to upregulate a little bit that muscle, sorry. Muscle was before, I didn't show it to you, but we were able to upregulate that tissue oxygenation. So I hope that gives us some direction and some avenues to discuss and to debate on. I think I look forward to the debate. That's going to be really interesting. And before thanking you for your attention, I wanted to thank all the people who have worked hard with me in the last few years, the profs and the students. And thank you very much for listening to me this morning.